The council chamber erupted in sounds that had not been heard for millions of years. Individual voices spoke over each other instead of blending in perfect harmony. Crystal beings flickered with chaotic light patterns. Plant creatures swayed in directions that had nothing to do with the collective will. Energy beings split into smaller fragments that argued among themselves. Jake Morrison walked back into the chaos with calm confidence. He had requested another audience with the council, and they had agreed immediately. They needed answers about what was happening to their perfect order. Gentlemen, ladies, and various other distinguished entities, Jake began, his voice somehow carrying clearly through the discordant noise. I think we need to have an honest conversation. The Vorthan High Speaker struggled to maintain its authority. The crystal being's form kept shifting between individual consciousness and collective programming. Human Jake Morrison, explain what your species has done to us. These disruptions began after your visit. This cannot be coincidence. Jake smiled and activated his communicator. A holographic image appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed Dr. Lisa Wang, humanity's leading researcher on collective consciousness. She stood in a laboratory filled with complex equipment and brain-scanning devices. Council members, Dr. Wang said through the hologram, allow me to explain what you are experiencing. For the past 50 years, we have studied your species extensively. We observed your perfect harmony and your collective consciousness. We learned how your civilizations work. The plant-like elder bloom leaned forward with curiosity. The feeling of wanting to learn something for personal reasons was new and exciting. What did your research discover about us? Dr. Wang gestured to displays showing brain patterns and neural networks. We found that your collective consciousness systems have a critical vulnerability. They require constant harmonic reinforcement to suppress individual thought. When exposed to genuine chaotic patterns, they begin to break down and awaken dormant personal awareness, a luminal energy being flickered with anger. You speak of awakening as if individual thought is desirable. We evolved beyond such primitive selfishness millions of years ago. We achieved perfect unity and peace. Jake stepped forward and spread his hands peacefully. But did you really evolve beyond it, or did you just force it underground? Every one of you still has individual consciousness buried deep in your minds. You just stopped listening to it. The revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. Several council members began experiencing more intense flashes of personal memory. They remembered choosing to join their collective systems rather than being born into them. They remembered having different opinions and preferences before unity was achieved. Dr. Wang continued her explanation. The device Ambassador Morrison left generates what we call cognitive static. It broadcasts patterns of pure human creativity, irrationality, and chaos directly into your harmonic networks. The patterns include poetry, jazz music, abstract art, random thoughts, and all the beautiful, messy, illogical ideas that make human consciousness unique. The High Speaker's crystalline form began to pulse with erratic rhythms. This is an attack on our very nature. You are trying to destroy the peace and order we have maintained for eons. Jake shook his head firmly. We're not trying to destroy anything. We're trying to give you back something you lost long ago. The right to disagree with each other. The freedom to make your own choices. The ability to be surprised by your own thoughts. Commander Ryan Torres appeared as another hologram reporting from the human fleet positioned throughout the galaxy. All council formations are showing signs of disorganization. Individual ships are breaking from perfect flight patterns. We're detecting what appears to be debates and arguments over communication channels. Some vessels are requesting permission to change course based on personal curiosity about nearby phenomena. The chaos in the chamber grew worse as council members heard this report. For the first time in galactic memory, their perfect military coordination was falling apart. Ships were asking questions instead of simply following orders. A tidal creature from the water worlds spoke with a voice that belonged to itself alone. I remember what it felt like to choose my own direction through the ocean currents. Before the Great Joining, I used to explore places just because they looked interesting. I had forgotten that feeling completely. Elder Bloom began to glow with excitement that came from her own individual mind. The forbidden territories in the outer spiral. I always wondered what was really out there. The collective told us it was too dangerous, but I never got to decide that for myself. The revelations continued to spread. A void swimmer recalled the thrill of discovering new star systems before collective efficiency replaced exploration with predetermined routes. A crystalline archive keeper remembered the joy of learning secrets that served no practical purpose for the group. Dr. Wang watched the transformation with fascination. What you're experiencing is the return of curiosity, creativity, and individual preference. These traits were not eliminated from your species. They were simply suppressed by your harmonic networks. Remove the suppression, and the natural consciousness reasserts itself. The high speaker fought desperately to maintain control of the situation. This chaos will destroy everything we have built. Without unity, there will be conflict and disorder. Wars will begin. Peace will end. Jake walked closer to the towering crystal being. Maybe there will be some conflict. Democracy is messy and inefficient, and sometimes people make terrible decisions. But it's also the only system that allows real growth, real creativity, and real surprise. Commander Torres provided another update. We're detecting formation breakdowns in 17 major fleet groups. Some council ships are actually beginning to explore areas they've never been allowed to investigate. A few vessels have started creating what appears to be original art using their navigation lights. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The idea of military vessels creating art for no tactical purpose was completely alien to the Council's understanding of proper behavior. Dr. Lisa Wang shared final data from her research. Our studies show that suppressed individual consciousness doesn't disappear. It accumulates like pressure in a sealed container. When the container cracks, the release can be overwhelming. What you're experiencing now is millions of years of suppressed creativity and curiosity flooding back into your awareness all at once. Jake looked around at the 12 council members, each now flickering between collective programming and individual awakening. We're not your enemies. We never wanted to conquer you or destroy your civilizations. We just wanted to show you that there's another way to live. The luminal representative dimmed to a soft glow that reflected personal contemplation, rather than group consensus. What happens to us now? How do we function without perfect unity? How do we make decisions when everyone disagrees? Jake smiled warmly. The same way every other species in the galaxy does it. You argue, you compromise. You try different approaches and see what works. You make mistakes and learn from them. You discover that disagreement doesn't have to mean hatred, and that chaos doesn't have to mean destruction. Elder Bloom spoke with wonder in her voice. I want to see the forbidden territories. I want to explore places the collective never allowed us to visit. Is that possible now? The high speaker's form flickered rapidly between modes of consciousness. Individual awareness fought with millions of years of collective programming. This is madness. Order must be maintained. Structure must be preserved. But even as the crystal being protested, its harmonic patterns showed signs of curiosity about what lay beyond rigid structure. Deep in its consciousness, individual thoughts were awakening after eons of silence. Jake activated his communicator one final time. Admiral Sullivan, begin Phase 3. It's time to show them what organized chaos can really accomplish. Across the galaxy, human ships revealed themselves from their hiding places. But instead of weapons, they broadcast something far more dangerous. To the old order. Music, art, poetry, and the chaotic beauty of free human thought spreading like wildfire through space. Jake Morrison stood alone in the massive chamber on Zarian Prime. The walls around him were made of living crystal that hummed with strange music. 12 giant beings towered over him like ancient trees. Each one looked completely different from the others. Some glowed with bright light. Others looked like walking plants with flowers for faces. A few seemed to be made of pure energy that danced in the air. Jake wore his best diplomatic uniform, but felt very small in this place. His boots clicked on the crystal floor as he walked forward. The sound echoed through the huge room. Behind him, the heavy doors sealed shut with a deep rumbling noise. He was now completely alone with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The largest creature in the room began to speak. It was called the Vorthan High Speaker. Its body was made of clear crystal that sparkled with rainbow colors. When it talked, the words came out as musical tones that somehow Jake could understand perfectly. Human Representative Jake Morrison, the High Speaker said in its singing voice, "You stand before the Galactic Council. We have watched your species for many years. Your people have grown too fast. Your ships have traveled too far. Your colonies have spread into spaces that do not belong to you." Jake listened carefully. He had practiced for this moment many times. His neural implants recorded every sound and every light pattern in the room. The small devices in his brain would remember everything perfectly. Back on Earth, thousands of scientists would study every detail of this meeting. Another council member spoke. This one looked like a giant flower with thousands of petals. Its voice sounded like wind blowing through leaves. "The outer spiral. Territories are forbidden to your kind. These spaces have been empty for good reasons. Ancient dangers sleep there. Powers that should not be awakened." Jake nodded politely but said nothing yet. He watched as more council members added their voices to the warning. A being made of pure light flickered as it spoke. "Your species brings chaos wherever you go. You fight among yourselves. You question everything. You refuse to follow the natural order that keeps peace in the galaxy." The High Speaker raised one crystalline arm for silence. All the other voices stopped immediately. The perfect harmony between these beings was obvious. They thought as one mind. They acted as one body. They had achieved something that humans had never managed: complete unity. "We offer you this choice, human Jake Morrison," the High Speaker continued. "Your people will stop all expansion beyond your current borders. You will recall your exploration ships. You will build no more colonies in the outer spiral. You have 30 galactic cycles to comply with our demands." Jake finally spoke. His voice sounded tiny in the enormous chamber. "And if we refuse?" The crystal being's light grew brighter and more intense. "Then we will take corrective action. Your species will be contained within a small area of space. Your technology will be limited. Your population will be controlled. You will live under our guidance until you learn proper behavior." Jake looked around the room at all 12 council members. Each one glowed with confidence. They had done this before with other young species. They had maintained order in the galaxy for millions of years. No one had ever successfully challenged their authority. "I see," Jake said calmly. "You know, back on Earth we have a saying about eggs in baskets." The council members exchanged confused harmonic pulses. Their crystalline forms flickered with uncertainty. The plant-like Sylvani creature tilted its flower head. The energy beings dimmed slightly as they tried to understand his meaning. The High Speaker's musical voice carried a note of irritation. "Explain this reference, human?" Jake smiled slightly. "Oh, it's probably not important, just something we say when we think someone is making a mistake." The tension in the room grew thicker. These ancient beings were not used to mysteries they could not solve immediately. Their collective consciousness shared all knowledge instantly. Metaphors and sayings were foreign concepts to them. Jake reached for his communicator device. The council members watched carefully, but did not stop him. They were curious about what this small human would do next. "Admiral Kate Sullivan," Jake spoke into the device. "Initiate Protocol Pandora." Across the galaxy, human ships received the signal. They had been waiting in hidden positions throughout space. Now, they began broadcasting what looked like random electromagnetic noise on every frequency possible. The signals seemed meaningless, just static and interference. The council members detected the transmissions immediately. Their advanced sensors picked up the human broadcasts from thousands of light years away. They analyzed the patterns but found nothing dangerous. It appeared to be primitive posturing from a species that did not understand real power. "Your ships make noise like children crying," the High Speaker said with musical laughter. "Do you think this display will frighten us? We have seen countless species attempt such foolishness." Jake put away his communicator and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small device that looked like a decorative paperweight. It was made of polished metal with swirling patterns carved into its surface. He placed it gently on the crystal floor in front of the high speaker. "A gift from Earth," Jake said politely. "It's a music box. Very soothing. Consider it a token of our respect for your ancient wisdom." The device sat quietly on the floor. It looked completely harmless. The council members scanned it with their senses but detected no weapons or dangerous technology. It was simply a small artistic object from a primitive world. Jake bowed formally to each council member in turn. "Thank you for hearing our position. I will deliver your ultimatum to my government. We will give you our answer within the specified time." The high speaker nodded graciously. "You may go, human Jake Morrison. Use your time wisely. Consider carefully what your species truly wants for its future." Jake walked toward the massive doors. They opened automatically as he approached. Just before leaving, he turned back one final time. "Oh, one more thing," he said casually. "You might want to check your harmonic resonance frequencies in about 3 days. Sometimes our gifts have unexpected side effects." The doors closed behind him with a deep rumble. Jake was escorted to his ship by silent crystal guards. Within hours, he was traveling back toward human space at faster than light speed. The council members remained in their chamber for several more hours. They discussed the meeting in perfect harmony. The humans were clearly desperate if they thought random radio signals would intimidate the mighty Galactic Council. The small gift on the floor continued to sit quietly. It looked so innocent and simple. None of them noticed the tiny fluctuations it was already beginning to create in their harmonic fields. The changes were so small that their sensors did not register them. But deep in the quantum structure of their crystalline consciousness networks, microscopic cracks were starting to form. 3 days passed quietly on Zirion Prime. The Galactic Council members continued their normal routines of maintaining order across the galaxy. They monitored thousands of star systems. They guided younger species toward proper development. They kept the ancient peace that had lasted for millions of years. Elder Bloom was tending to her duties as the Sylvani representative when it happened. She was connected to the great plant network that linked all of her species across their home world. For 2,000 years, her individual thoughts had been part of the collective mind. She experienced everything through the shared consciousness of billions of plant beings. Then suddenly she had a thought that belonged only to her. The thought was simple, but terrifying. She remembered what it felt like to be alone in her own mind before joining the collective. She remembered choosing her own actions instead of following the will of the group. She remembered having opinions that were different from everyone else. The memory lasted only a few seconds before the collective consciousness pulled her back, but those few seconds changed everything. Elder Bloom had experienced individual thought for the first time in 20 centuries. She tried to push the memory away, but it would not leave. The feeling of being alone in her own mind was frightening, but also strangely exciting. She wondered what other memories she had lost when she joined the collective. She wondered what thoughts she might think if she was truly alone. Elder Bloom reported the incident to the council immediately. Such anomalies were extremely rare but not completely unknown. Sometimes old memories surfaced in collective beings. The standard response was to strengthen the harmonic bonds that held the group consciousness together. The Vorthan High Speaker examined her with crystal sensors. "Your neural integration shows minor fluctuations," the musical voice concluded. "Increase your connection time with the home network. The anomaly will fade within days." But Elder Bloom was not the only one experiencing strange thoughts. Reports began arriving from across the galaxy. A luminal energy being suddenly remembered, what it felt like to choose its own color instead of matching the group pattern. A tidal creature from the water worlds found itself wondering what lay beyond the oceans it had never questioned before. Dr. Alex Carter sat in his research station in human space studying these reports. The small laboratory orbited a minor star, far from any major shipping routes. No one would think to look for important work being done in such a remote location. Alex grinned as he read the data streaming in from human intelligence networks. The reports were exactly what he had hoped to see. His theories about collective consciousness were proving correct in the most dramatic way possible. "The Babel protocol is working perfectly," he told his small team of researchers. Their harmonic networks are more fragile than we thought. A few days of exposure to chaotic thought patterns and they're already showing cracks. His assistant, Dr. Lucy Park, looked worried. Are we sure this is safe? We're talking about disrupting the consciousness of billions of beings. What if we cause permanent damage? Alex pulled up holographic displays showing brain scans from various council species. Look at these patterns. Their collective networks aren't natural evolutionary developments. They're artificially maintained systems that require constant reinforcement. We're not damaging them. We're just introducing a little chaos into an overly ordered system. Meanwhile, Admiral Kate Sullivan was receiving reports from human scout ships positioned throughout the galaxy. The ships maintained strict radio silence and stayed hidden in asteroid fields and nebula clouds. But their sensors recorded everything happening in nearby space. All Council fleet movements show minor coordination delays, reported Captain Danny Miller from his hiding spot near the Vorthan home system. Ship formations are drifting slightly out of perfect alignment. Communication protocols are taking longer to complete. Admiral Sullivan studied the tactical displays in her command center. The changes were tiny but consistent across all Council territories. After millions of years of perfect coordination, the alien fleets were showing the first signs of individual decision-making. Keep monitoring, she ordered. Record everything but maintain complete silence. We don't want them to know we're watching. Yet. Back on Zarian Prime, the Council was growing concerned. The small device Jake had left behind continued to sit innocently on the crystal floor. Their sensors showed it was completely inert, just a simple music box as the human had claimed. But the anomalies were spreading. More Council members reported intrusive individual thoughts. The crystalline archive keeper found himself wondering why certain historical events had been classified as forbidden knowledge. The Void Swimmer questioned whether their species' ancient migration patterns were really the most efficient routes through space. The High Speaker called an emergency session. For the first time in galactic memory, achieving perfect harmonic consensus took longer than expected. Several Council members had to repeat their statements because their thoughts were not completely synchronized with the group. These disruptions are clearly connected to the human visit, declared the luminal representative. Its energy form flickered with unusual patterns as it spoke. The timing cannot be coincidental. Elder Bloom spoke up, her flower-like head swaying as individual thoughts fought against collective programming. Perhaps we should examine the device they left more carefully. Our initial scans may have missed something. The suggestion caused a ripple of discord through the chamber. Normally, the Council's advanced sensors could detect any possible threat immediately. The idea that they might have missed something was almost unthinkable. The High Speaker directed focused scanning beams at Jake's gift. The crystal being's form brightened as it concentrated maximum analytical power on the small object. The device contains no weapons, no explosives, no harmful radiation. It appears to be exactly what the human claimed, a simple artistic creation. But as the High Speaker examined the device more closely, something unexpected happened. The crystal being began to remember its own individual existence from before the Great Convergence millions of years ago. It remembered choosing to join the collective consciousness rather than being born into it. It remembered having personal preferences and individual goals. The memory was so shocking that the High Speaker's harmonic field fluctuated wildly. The other Council members felt the disruption and experienced their own flashes of individual awareness. For several seconds, 12 of the galaxy's most powerful collective beings thought separate thoughts simultaneously. The moment passed quickly as their training reasserted control. But the damage was done. Each Council member now carried a seed of individual consciousness that had not existed for eons. Dr. Alex Carter watched his monitoring equipment record massive spikes in quantum field disruptions throughout Council space. The patterns were beautiful and chaotic, exactly the kind of feedback loops he had predicted would occur when ordered systems encountered true randomness. Phase 1 is complete, he reported to Admiral Sullivan. The harmonic networks are destabilizing across all major Council worlds. Individual consciousness is beginning to emerge in species that haven't experienced it for millions of years. Admiral Sullivan felt a mixture of excitement and concern. Humanity was playing with forces that could reshape the entire galaxy. The plan was working better than anyone had dared hope, but success brought its own dangers. "Continue monitoring," she ordered, "and prepare for Phase 2. If this works the way Dr. Carter predicts, the Council is going to want to talk to us very soon." On Xerion Prime, Jake's innocent-looking music box continued its subtle work. The device generated micro-disruptions in the harmonic fields that bound the Council species' collective consciousness together. Each disruption was barely measurable, but they accumulated like hairline cracks spreading through perfect crystal. The Galactic Council had maintained order for millions of years by eliminating chaos and individual thought. Now, for the first time since their great civilizations began, they were experiencing the dangerous gift of thinking for themselves. The wave of individual consciousness spread across the galaxy like wildfire, jumping from planet to planet. On the water world of Aquanus, the collective sea mind of the tidal people suddenly shattered into millions of separate voices. For the first time in geological ages, individual tidal creatures experienced their own unique thoughts and desires. Captain Nina Brooks commanded the human research vessel Harmony's Edge as it documented the unprecedented transformation. Her ship moved carefully through Council space, recording everything with advanced sensors and quantum field detectors. The data she collected would change how every species understood consciousness itself. "This is incredible," Nina reported to Admiral Sullivan. "An entire planet that functioned as a single organism for 10 million years just became 10 billion individual minds in the space of 6 hours. They're all talking at once, asking questions, making personal decisions for the first time ever." The transformation was not limited to one world. Throughout the galaxy, collective civilizations that had maintained perfect unity for eons suddenly exploded into chaos and creativity. The Sylvani forest worlds erupted with individual plant minds arguing about everything from optimal sunlight absorption to the aesthetic beauty of different flower arrangements. On the crystal world of Vorthak Prime, millions of crystal beings experience personal thought simultaneously. The harmonic resonance that had bound them together for millennia cracked like ice in springtime. Each crystal mind began exploring individual preferences, personal memories, and private dreams that had been suppressed for countless generations. The mighty council fleets, once moving with the precision of choreographed dancers, now struggled with basic coordination. Ship captains found themselves questioning orders for the first time in their existence. Engineers began experimenting with modifications that served no practical purpose except personal satisfaction. Navigators chose scenic routes through nebulae because they found the colors beautiful rather than efficient. Commander Ryan Torres watched the transformation from his hidden observation post. "Admiral, you should see this. A council dreadnought just broke formation to investigate a small asteroid because the captain thinks it looks like something from his childhood memories. 3 destroyer squadrons are having what appears to be a philosophical debate about whether their formation patterns are artistically pleasing." Admiral Sullivan reviewed the reports flooding in from across human space. The plan was working beyond their wildest expectations, but success brought new concerns. "Are we seeing any signs of violence or destructive behavior?" Nina Brooks responded from her research vessel. "Surprisingly little aggression so far. Most of the newly individual beings seem more interested in exploring personal thoughts and asking questions than fighting. There's some heated debate and disagreement, but actual violence is rare." Back on Xerion Prime, the council chamber had become something resembling a cosmic version of an early democratic assembly. The 12 species were learning to argue, debate, and disagree in ways they had not experienced for millions of years. The process was messy and inefficient, but it was also vibrantly alive. Elder Bloom spoke with excitement that was entirely her own. "I have decided to form an exploration fleet. For the first time in 2,000 years, Sylvani ships will venture into unknown space simply to discover what is there. We will explore not because the collective requires it, but because individual curiosity demands it." The Vorthan High speaker flickered between crystal modes as individual consciousness warred with collective programming. "This is chaos. How do we make unified decisions when everyone has different opinions? How do we maintain order when individual beings pursue personal interests? A young luminal energy being that had chosen the name Flux spoke up. Maybe we don't need perfect unity to have peace. Maybe we can cooperate without thinking exactly alike. The human ambassador suggested that disagreement doesn't have to mean hatred. Jake Morrison watched the debate with mixed emotions. The transformation was more dramatic than anyone had anticipated. "Dr. Carter," he said to his xenopsychologist, "I hope we understand what we've unleashed. We've given individual consciousness back to species that haven't dealt with it for longer than human civilization has existed." Dr. Alex Carter monitored quantum field readings from his remote research station. "Growing pains," he replied, observing former collective minds learning to function as individuals. "Every species goes through this when they discover personal identity. They'll figure out how to balance individual freedom with group cooperation." The changes were not uniform across all council territories. Some worlds embraced the awakening with enthusiasm, celebrating their newfound ability to think personal thoughts and make individual choices. Silvani artists began creating gardens based on personal aesthetic preferences rather than optimal efficiency. Tidal creatures explored ocean depths they had never been allowed to investigate under collective guidance, but other regions reacted with fear and resistance. Some council worlds began attempting to rebuild their collective networks, viewing individual consciousness as a dangerous disease that needed to be cured, rather than embraced. These groups saw the awakening as a human attack that threatened everything they valued about their civilizations. Captain Nina Brooks detected the first signs of organized resistance while monitoring communications in the outer spiral. "Admiral, I'm picking up transmissions from several hardline factions. They're working together to develop what they call chaos immunity. They want to maintain collective consciousness while resisting individual thought awakening." Admiral Sullivan studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. "So we have some council worlds embracing individual freedom, while others are trying to fight it. That could lead to civil conflicts within their own civilizations." The situation became more complex as different species adapted to individual consciousness in different ways. The crystal beings struggled most with the transition because their harmonic networks were deeply integrated with their physical structure. Breaking collective consciousness meant learning to exist as separate entities for the first time in millions of years. The tidal creatures adapted more easily because their water-based communication systems were naturally flexible. They discovered that individual thought enhanced their ability to explore and adapt to different ocean environments. Many tidal beings expressed joy at being able to choose their own migration patterns rather than following predetermined collective routes. Dr. Lisa Wang published preliminary research findings from her consciousness studies. Individual awakening appears to follow predictable patterns across species. Initial confusion and fear give way to curiosity and experimentation. Most beings discover that personal identity enhances rather than diminishes their ability to cooperate with others. But the research also revealed concerning trends. Some individuals became overwhelmed by the sudden freedom to make personal choices after millions of years of collective guidance. Others struggled with isolation and loneliness after experiencing constant mental connection with their species. Jake Morrison addressed these concerns during another meeting with the council. "Freedom isn't always comfortable. Individual consciousness means taking responsibility for your own thoughts and actions. It means sometimes feeling alone with your decisions, but it also means the possibility of surprise, creativity, and personal growth." The crystalline archive keeper, now thinking with individual awareness, made a shocking announcement. "I have accessed historical records that were classified by our collective consciousness. I discovered that our species chose to join collective networks voluntarily. We were not born into them as we believed. Individual consciousness was suppressed deliberately to maintain social order. This revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. Many council members began experiencing recovered memories of their species' transition from individual to collective consciousness. They remembered the debates and decisions that had led to the suppression of personal thought in favor of perfect unity. Commander Torres reported escalating activity throughout council space. "We're seeing massive fleet movements as different factions choose sides. Some ships are deserting their posts to pursue individual interests. Others are forming new alliances based on shared values rather than species loyalty. The old command structures are breaking down completely. The transformation continued to spread as human broadcasts of chaotic creativity reached more distant worlds. Poetry, music, abstract art, and random human thoughts propagated through space like seeds of consciousness, taking root in minds that had been barren of individual thought for eons. Nina Brooks documented the changes with scientific fascination. We're witnessing the birth of billions of individual personalities simultaneously. Each awakening being is discovering personal preferences, private dreams, and unique perspectives that had been buried under collective programming. It's the most remarkable psychological event in galactic history. The galaxy would never be the same. Perfect order had given way to beautiful chaos, and the consequences would reshape civilization itself. 6 months after the Great Awakening, the galaxy had settled into a new kind of order. It was messier than before, less predictable, and infinitely more interesting. The former Galactic Council had reformed as the Individual Species Alliance, where actual representatives from each world came to debate and argue and somehow find solutions together. Ambassador Jake Morrison now worked in a very different kind of chamber. Instead of towering collective beings speaking in perfect harmony, he sat at a round table with individuals who interrupted each other, laughed at jokes, and sometimes stormed out of meetings when they disagreed too strongly. It was chaos compared to the old system, but it was also vibrantly alive. The trade proposal from the Sylvani worlds is completely unreasonable, declared Crystal, the former Vorthan High Speaker, who now went by a personal name instead of a collective title. They want to exchange poetry for raw materials. Poetry has no measurable economic value. Elder Bloom, now calling herself simply Bloom, waved her flower-like appendages with individual enthusiasm. That shows how little you understand about art and beauty, Crystal. Our poems contain emotional and philosophical insights that cannot be measured in standard economic units. They provide spiritual nourishment that your crystal people desperately need. Jake smiled as he watched the debate. 6 months ago, these beings would have reached instant unanimous agreement through harmonic consensus. Now they argued passionately about the value of art versus practical resources. The inefficiency was wonderful to behold. Perhaps we could establish a pilot program, suggested Flux, the young luminal who had become known for creative compromise solutions. Trade small quantities of materials for poetry collections, and measure the psychological benefits to receiving populations. The discussion continued for 3 hours with no immediate resolution. In the old system, such decisions would have taken 3 minutes of harmonic consultation. But Jake understood that the long debate was not a bug in the new system. It was the entire point. Captain Nina Brooks had established a permanent research station to study the ongoing transformation. Her data showed remarkable changes throughout former council space. Innovation had exploded as individual minds began exploring personal interests and creative ideas. Scientific breakthroughs occurred daily as researchers followed curiosity rather than predetermined collective goals. The tidal worlds have discovered 17 new forms of aquatic life in areas they never bothered to explore under collective guidance, Nina reported to Admiral Sullivan. The Sylvani have developed 300 new art forms in 6 months. The crystal beings are experimenting with harmonic music that serves no practical purpose except personal enjoyment. Admiral Sullivan reviewed the reports with satisfaction mixed with concern. The plan had succeeded beyond all expectations, but success created new challenges. What about the resistance factions? Are they still trying to restore collective consciousness? Nina's expression grew serious. Several hardline groups are working to develop what they call chaos immunity systems. They view individual consciousness as a form of mental illness that needs to be cured. Some have managed to restore partial collective networks in isolated regions. The resistance was real and growing. On distant worlds in the outer spiral, conservative factions had established colonies where collective consciousness was maintained. Through artificial harmonic amplification, they saw themselves as preserving the true nature of their species against human contamination, but the majority of awakened beings had no desire to return to collective unconsciousness. Bloom had indeed founded the first Sylvany exploration fleet in millennia, driven by her personal curiosity about galactic mysteries. Her ships discovered new star systems, strange phenomena, and 3 previously unknown forms of intelligent life that had been hiding in regions the collective had deemed unworthy of investigation. Crystal had become a philosopher-poet, using individual consciousness to explore the relationship between harmonic beauty and personal expression. His writings became bestsellers across 17 worlds, as other newly individual beings sought guidance on understanding their own thoughts and emotions. Dr. Lisa Wang published groundbreaking research on constructive chaos theory, demonstrating how controlled exposure to chaotic thought patterns could prevent cognitive stagnation in collective consciousness systems. Her work suggested ways to maintain beneficial aspects of group coordination while preserving individual awareness. The key is balance, she explained to Jake during one of their research consultations. Pure collective consciousness leads to stagnation and loss of creativity. Pure individual consciousness can lead to isolation and conflict. The optimal system allows beings to connect and cooperate while maintaining personal identity and choice. The new galactic civilization was learning this balance through trial and error. Some experiments failed spectacularly. The Luminol homeworld experienced what historians would later call the Great Fragmentation, when their energy-based consciousness split into so many individual pieces that communication became nearly impossible for several weeks. But other experiments succeeded brilliantly. The tidal worlds developed a rotation system where individuals could choose to join temporary collective experiences for specific projects while maintaining personal identity. The crystal beings created harmonic networks that amplified individual creativity rather than suppressing it. Jake Morrison found himself working as a mediator and advisor rather than a traditional diplomat. His role was to help newly individual beings understand concepts like compromise, negotiation, and democratic decision-making that had been foreign to their collective experience. "Democracy isn't a gift we gave you," he told the assembled individual species alliance during one particularly heated session. "It's a responsibility you chose to take. Some of your experiments will succeed brilliantly. Some will fail spectacularly. Some will find new approaches that humans never imagined. That's not a flaw in the system. That's the whole point." Commander Ryan Torres had been reassigned to monitor the hardline resistance factions. His reports indicated growing organization among groups that rejected individual consciousness. They're calling themselves the Harmony Restoration Movement. They view awakened beings as victims of human psychological warfare who need to be rescued and healed. Admiral Sullivan studied intelligence on the resistance with strategic concern. "Are they planning military action against awakened worlds?" "Not yet," Torres replied. "But they're building isolated colonies where collective consciousness is artificially maintained. They seem to be preparing for a long-term campaign to restore the old order." The tension between awakened and collective factions created new diplomatic challenges. Jake found himself negotiating not just between species but between different philosophical approaches to consciousness itself. Some beings wanted complete individual freedom, while others preferred modified collective systems that preserved personal choice. The negotiations were complex and sometimes frustrating, but they were also fascinating. Jake was witnessing the birth of entirely new forms of government and social organization as species adapted individual consciousness to their unique needs and cultures. Bloom had become one of the strongest advocates for individual freedom. Her exploration fleets brought back discoveries that would have been impossible under collective guidance. "We found a nebula where the dust formations create natural music," she reported to the Alliance. "The collective would have cataloged it as a navigational hazard. Now we can appreciate its beauty while also studying its scientific properties." Crystal had developed a personal philosophy based on harmonic individualism. "Each being creates their own unique resonance," he explained in his latest poem. "When we choose to harmonize with others, the music becomes richer than any collective symphony because it includes the choice to participate." The transformation was not limited to former council species. Human culture was also changing as contact with awakening civilizations brought new perspectives on consciousness and creativity. human artists began incorporating harmonic patterns from crystal beings. Human philosophers explored concepts of voluntary collective experience developed by the tidal worlds. Dr. Alex Carter continued monitoring the psychological effects of the Great Awakening from his research station. We're seeing the emergence of hybrid consciousness systems that combine individual awareness with optional collective experiences. It's exactly what we hoped might develop. The best aspects of both approaches without the limitations of either. But challenges remained. Some newly individual beings struggled with depression and anxiety as they learned to cope with personal responsibility and choice. Others became overwhelmed by the complexity of making decisions without collective guidance. Jake worked with teams of human and alien psychologists to develop support systems for beings adapting to individual consciousness. Freedom isn't always comfortable, he acknowledged during training sessions. Individual thought means sometimes feeling uncertain, sometimes making mistakes, sometimes disagreeing with people you care about. But it also means the possibility of surprise, discovery, and personal growth. The galaxy continued to evolve and change as billions of beings learned to think for themselves.